This is the Philadelphia Flyers Young Star Ranking. I'm going to go through players drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers from the years of 2014 to 2020. The catch is I'm going to do it by position. I'm going to try to avoid a lot of these apples and oranges situations, and I'm going to try to compare players that have maybe a future role alignment with the other players and try to avoid some of these goaltender center type of relationships. Let's get into it. Let's talk goalies. The goalies is an interesting one because it's really tough to gauge, and I could definitely end up being wrong on these. For the most part, most goalies are kind of projects. You draft them, you leave them alone for years, and then you see how they develop over time. Maybe there's a guy that you didn't even expect to be an NHL player, but just the way he developed and, he hit the age of 24, 25, and all of a sudden starts being an NHL player. It happens. A lot of goaltenders don't even touch the NHL until they're 26, 27. It's not like the other positions. So these rankings could definitely be all wrong. Having said that, let's start with my first one. Matej Tomek at number 7. So Tomek is an interesting one. He's a player who was actually drafted relatively high. Had some injury problems. Also didn't get to play much. Now he's playing overseas. And he's having some success. So I put him at the bottom of the list, but I don't know if he's ever even coming over here. Quite frankly, I would say I wouldn't say forget about him, but you just leave him be for now and see, does his game change? Does it evolve? I would say right now he doesn't really project to be a pro hockey player over in the U.S. I don't know if he's even ever going to come to the AHL, but I think he's still fighting. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's got size. He's got skill. He's clearly, to some extent, talented that he can play over with the Czech league and have success there, but I just don't know if he's actually going to materialize to being an NHL prospect at some point. But the Flyers will hold on to him, and we'll see. Again, goaltenders, most of them are projects, so it is what it is. Robby Ross. Now, Ross was a later pick as well. He had some good success this year, actually played really well. Didn't have ridiculous numbers or anything like that, but he's doing well for his career. He's not really a player that I think a lot of us will expect to kind of be in a Flyers uniform at some point. But again, he's one of those players, you're going to leave him out there, you're going to let him do his thing, see how he does next year. If he kind of makes another jump, or maybe he puts up some large numbers, then he can start catching attention. But up until then, he'll be working his way through the system. And maybe will be an ECHL guy to start playing for the Flyers. Maybe won't get signed. But I suspect he might start the ECHL. Flyers aren't that deep at goaltending. As far as youth, a lot of them are kind of hit and miss picks, except for kind of the top. But he's a guy that could project into be a pro one day. We'll never really know. But so far he has progressed nicely, so it could happen. I don't want to take it away from him, but that's why he sits at number 6. Next on the list is Felix Sandstrom. So a lot of us got to look at Felix Sandstrom this past season for the first time. Played in the ECHL majority of his season, split the time with Ustamenko. I don't know about Sandstrom because I actually really liked his game. Coming in as he was drafted, he has skill, definite skill, and definitely had some success against pro players over in Sweden. I just don't know if he is going to put his game together to play for the Phantoms or the Flyers. Like right now, I would say with him being an ECHL player, him watching a younger Ustamenko pass him in the rankings, I would say he's at risk to going back to Sweden. Maybe that's what's best for him. But at the very least, he's going to be a Swedish pro player. And maybe he's somebody we look at in the future. He does have skill, but we have some depth. We have good young goaltenders. But I don't know how much longer. It could happen. I don't know how satisfied he's going to be playing in the ECHL when he can go play against men overseas, especially with the current situation with COVID and whatnot. So Sandstrom could just be that long-term project, sits out there in the ether. The Flyers kind of hold on to his rights, and if he ever comes to the NHL, he could play for the Flyers. Could prove me wrong there. I don't want to give up on him. I love Swedish players in a lot of ways because I just feel like their culture allows for a lot of hard work and bounce back and whatnot, especially when it comes to hockey. So, I wouldn't give up on Felix Sandstrom, but I don't know if he kind of held that same prestige in my eyes as he did prior to coming to ECHL. The fact that he didn't have that much success in the ECHL also concerns me, because that league is not necessarily a huge indicator that you're going to do well in the NHL. But again, still time and still young, so I don't know. I don't want to put that limitation on him. So going to the next one, number 4, Ivan Fedotov. He's playing in the KHL right now. He was a 7th-round pick, a mammoth-sized goaltender, and a guy that everybody wanted to forget about. At the time when I heard people say forget about him, this is why I say that about the previous guys. Do not count any goaltenders out at all. There's zero reason to do so. Just wait with them. Eventually, they might not turn into anything. It's, odds are against them, quite frankly. There's only one position to play per game, right? So you got 2 goaltenders per game. Odds are not high that they're playing pro hockey in the AHL or NHL. But Fedotov so far had an exceptional season in the KHL, playing against men. He's huge. I don't know if he's coming to the NHL at all. I don't know if the Flyers can convince him to take, a low-end amount of money, because it seems to me like he's going to be a KHL starter. Having said that, we own his rights. So if he continues to progress at the rate that he's progressing, I mean, if there's a little bit of money to actually bring over, maybe pay him a couple million a year to have him be back up in the NHL behind Carter Hart, that could be really interesting. I would say it's not that likely, especially at this point, but we'll see. He's definitely exceeded expectations and could do so more further. He's a guy that we don't really know what his ceiling is or his bottom. I don't even know if he's good enough at the KHL level to translate that to the AHL level directly. There is kind of a loss there with the way they play. But again, his age, his size, I wouldn't count him out, and he seems to have pro upside. And I think Fedotov is a really nice addition, especially his 7th round. I have him at 4, passing Sandstrom, for the reason because he's having success against men, and he's huge. And that's important. I want to see if he can turn out, because he could end up being maybe a really good goaltender for all we know. All right, and this is where we get really interesting, and I think there's some kind of movement around here. I think with number 3 and 2, there are going to be maybe some arguments. I think number 1, there is no argument, but obviously number 3, Kirill Ustamenko. He's my number 3. I'm a little hesitant to put him at 3 and not at 2. Because he did have a great year. He jumped out of the ECHL. He did well in the AHL immediately. Obviously, this kid has an AHL future, at the very least, an AHL future. Probably a pro overseas if he doesn't play in the NHL. Probably going to be a pretty good goalie, but he does seem to project as an NHL goalie right now. Could be the backup of the future, or potentially even a starter somewhere else. The kid has a lot of skill. Again, to come in as a young kid, he got taken at 80. It's not bad at all, right? Like, it's not like he's like a low pick. It's where good goaltenders are usually taken, and he's gotten better every year. So, again, drafted 2017, so you're talking about 3 years. He's probably got a couple years to go. But overall, I mean, it's a good pickup. It's a good pickup. It seems to me like at the very least he's an AHL or NHL backup, but could project as a starter in the NHL. And if he continues his progress, I mean, the Flyers are loaded at goaltenders if that's the case. If their number 3 on my list is an NHL starter, I mean, while we don't have like the overall, guarantees with goaltenders, I mean, you're doubling up your odds, especially with the number 1 name. Number 2, Samuel Ersson. Now, Ersson is a player who actually took maybe a half step back last year. I would say he would have been the clear-cut number 2 on my list because he had a monster season playing against men. A Swedish player. He's had a lot of success against men, and not like Felix Sandstrom, who had kind of mediocre numbers playing against men. Like Ersson had like all-star level numbers, and this year as we speak, he's had pretty good numbers to start his year. So I put him number 2 because he seems like an NHL goaltender within the near future. Just like Ustamenko, and also projects to be a starting goaltender. So maybe interchangeable with Ustamenko. I'm not that strong at him at 2 over 3. And if you want to make that argument, I'm open to it. But I definitely think just the sheer fact that he projects to be an NHL goaltender at this point has him at number 2. And he's done it with style. Like he did it so well. Especially the previous year. I mean, he wasn't giving up goals at all. I mean, his numbers were ridiculous. I'm not going to go through numbers on these because it takes too long, but his numbers were stupid. In all of the write-ups, there'll be links to their stats. Go look at them. I mean, 2 years ago, his numbers were like, what? So again, stuff to pay attention to when you see a goaltender do that at a young age against men. I have to pay attention to it, and I have to consider him as an NHL starter. And that year alone was enough to keep him at number 2 over Ustamenko, who maybe could have stolen that because he also had a great season in his own right. But with him at 2 and Ustamenko at 3, I feel very comfortable. The number 1, and he's not a prospect. We all know he's not a prospect. He essentially wasn't even a prospect his first season, which is kind of insane if you really think about it. And really an indication of how good this kid is. Carter Hart. I mean, you listen to the names I talked about, the way I refer to other goaltenders needing time. What time did Carter Hart need? I mean, it's arguable. I'm going to make this very clear. He might already be the best goaltender in the NHL. That might be controversial, but really outside of his age, there's no other reason to think that he can't be. I mean, sheer numbers alone, the fact he's able to steal games, the fact he's so young. If you can label Carey Price the best goaltender in the league at 21, 22, or whatever they started doing, you can start talking that way about Carter Hart right now. I know there's other great goaltenders in the league. This isn't to downplay their skill. There are plenty of other young goaltenders that could take that mantle. But right now, Carter Hart seems to be the top of that class. And that feels amazing to say. And you could just see it all year. I mean, I have more faith in him than any goaltender I've ever seen in a Flyers uniform, and he's a child. And I mean that honestly. And it's just the immense amount of respect I have for him as a prospect, his mental head game. Like, I don't see him not challenging for Vezinas. Like, I don't see it. I could be wrong. I don't think other people don't see it either. Maybe he's not your favorite for the Vezina that year, but he's definitely in the conversation every year. And I think that that's the type of player the Flyers have. He's a franchise caliber goaltender taken in the second round. That's where I think a lot of franchise caliber goaltenders can be taken. It doesn't matter where you're taken as far as a goaltender. You can arrive from anywhere. But, they talk about all these other great goalies and how they have great numbers, and Spencer Knight, and everybody's always the great. So far, Carter Hart didn't get drafted with that big prestige. He just did it by the numbers. He just did it with results. And even now, people, it's Philadelphia. We constantly get ignored. I don't even want to talk about the NHL Network lists. That won't be here. And as you can see, Carter Hart's already making those lists. They can't even deny it themselves with their homerism. I'm very excited about Carter Hart. And like I said, a franchise caliber goaltender. And it feels so good to say. So with, again, Carter Hart at number 1, Ersson at 2, Ustamenko at 3, Fedorov at 4, Sandstrom at 5, Ross at 6, and 7 at Tomek. I do feel comfortable where the Flyers are goaltending-wise. They will have to probably bring another name into that mix, whether it be an older veteran in the future, maybe a guy who's just about ready. Maybe that's Alex Lyon, but I suspect the Flyers might go out and get a guy to replace Elliott in the future. But you see the names even behind Hart. Eventually the AHL will be battling, and we'll be screaming to take a look at these other guys. If not, we're already there today. I'm excited. You're excited. Stay excited about Flyers goaltending.